Hey guys, this is Jam of jamonline.ph, and today we got here the latest smartphone from POCO, the POCO F5. I know this is not the Pro version, this is the POCO F5, and despite being not the Pro version of this smartphone series, this one packs a quiet, surprising performance. So the smartphone packs a Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 processor, and then there's the 120Hz AMOLED display as well, and then there's the 64-megapixel triple lens camera. Now let's talk about this smartphone. As you can see here in the smartphone, we got here some dust and some fingerprints, but I do like the design at the back of the smartphone. Look at that. But this one is actually made up of plastic, so that's a bummer that this one doesn't have a premium finish. It's all plastic over here and also over here. On the side, we got here the flat sides. We got here the fingerprint scanner that also acts as the power button, and then there's the volume rocker, and then at the top, surprisingly, we got here the headphone jack and of course the IR blaster. Below the smartphone is the USB Type-C. Going at the back of the smartphone, we got here the 64-megapixel main camera, 8-megapixel ultra-wide, and the 2-megapixel macro lens. Unfortunately, they didn't include a telephoto lens on this smartphone. So yes, if you're planning on zooming in or using it at concerts, well, you're out of luck. There's no telephoto zoom lens on the smartphone. But of course, we're going to talk about the camera quality later on. So for the RAM of the smartphone, we got here the 12 gigs of RAM plus 3 gigs of virtual RAM, which is basically not so useful. As long as you have the 12 gigs of RAM, that is more than enough, as some flagships are still using 8 gigs of RAM. And for the storage, we got here 12 gigs of internal storage, which is, again, more than enough for some people. But for some people who are playing a lot of games, like heavier games like Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, well, the 256 gigs might not be enough for some, but I believe only some people will only think that the 256 gig of storage is lacking for them. And the top, of course, we got here the 16-megapixel selfie camera. I almost forget about that one. So there's nothing really unique about the design of the smartphone. It's kind of blocky, yes, but it's already light enough to be used anywhere. And again, there's a lot of fingerprints, which annoys me a little bit. As you can see, there's a lot of fingerprints already at the back of the smartphone. But of course, I still suggest that you use the included jelly case at the box of the smartphone. So for the battery of this one, we got here 5,000 mAh of battery, and it is also paired with a 67 watts wire charging. Unfortunately, it's not 100 watts, but 67 watts is more than enough for most people. It's already fast enough. As long as you charge it for a few minutes, you could actually see this one fully charged already. And yes, as for the battery life of the smartphone, this one packs a pretty good battery life according to PC Mark Work 2.0 battery test. And I'm actually quite satisfied with it. As for the display of the smartphone, again, there's the 120Hz Flow AMOLED display. They call it the Flow AMOLED. But overall, look at the display of this one. It's flat, it's nice, the colors are really good, the contrast is really nice, the sunlight legibility of the smartphone is quite good as well. And when I'm playing games on the smartphone, I actually love it because it has a flat display. It is smooth thanks to 120Hz refresh rate. The colors are really nice. And again, it's so comfortable to use when playing games. Some of you might say that this isn't the best display that we have on a smartphone. Well, of course, that is true. But for most people who are not really into the itty-bitty details of the smartphone's display, this one would do just great. And again, the most important thing for me is that the smartphone's display is really responsive. Now, let's go to the camera of the smartphone. So the camera of the smartphone, again, we got here 64-megapixel main camera, and the POCO F5's camera isn't its best feature, as we got here some just average to below average quality shots here in the smartphone. In some of my shots, I've noticed that the smartphone tend to have a quite sharp images, but the colors are a little bit off and it's a little bit overexposed, especially for a smartphone at its price range. So when we're talking about camera of the smartphone, yes, it will do just fine when you're just taking photos. You're not really worried about the quality of the smartphone as long as you can post it on Facebook or whatever. But yeah, you could notice that this one is a little bit hit and miss when it comes to the exposure of the smartphone. As for the night shots, I've noticed that this one is a little bit brighter than expected, and however, I've noticed that this one lacks some colors. Again, it's a hit and miss when it comes to the colors of the smartphone. But as for the brightness and as for the night shots, it was actually better than I expected after trying it out at a well-lit conditions. And yes, the smartphone can record at up to 4K, however, it's only up to 30 frames per second, which isn't that bad. Now let's talk about the software that we're using here at the POCO F5. So the POCO F5 is actually using the MIUI 14 for POCO, and it's running on Android 13. So you can see in here, we got here the MIUI version for POCO and everything on the smartphone. Actually, I got an update for this one. Now, after I've opened the smartphone, I've noticed that there are some bloatwares on the smartphone, just like most MIUI smartphones that I've tried before. And yes, everything was actually quite good when it comes to the experience, but I was expecting more ads on the smartphone. And yes, I did get some ads, some annoying notifications and everything. And again, the bloatwares are just annoying on the smartphone, and I wish I could uninstall all of them. But the experience of the smartphone was quite fast, responsive, and quite good. Maybe because of the Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 processor along with its RAM and everything. The UI was good, except for that annoying notifications and ads on the smartphone. Now let's talk about the performance inside the POCO F5. So inside the smartphone is actually a Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 processor, and when we're talking about performance, wow, I was actually amazed with the performance of the Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 processor. It's quite near to the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor, which is the flagship processor last year. And this year, this is for the mid-range smartphone, the 7 Plus Gen 2. And again, I was actually amazed with its performance. The temperatures were quite good, and I was playing heavy games on the smartphone like Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, Call of Duty, name it, the smartphone can run most of it. And in our benchmarks, we've noticed that the scores on the smartphone were quite good. So overall, the POCO F5 is actually a quite surprising smartphone when it comes to performance. As for the design, well, it's not really the best one. We got here the plastic body, quite generic design, but it's quite handy and it's pretty light. However, again, it's not really the best camera that we can see, especially for its price range. Everything, well, is just kind of average except for the performance. The performance of the POCO F5 is actually quite surprising. This is the first time that we have reviewed a Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 processor smartphone, and I was amazed with its performance as we're getting here a really good frames on different games despite being a brand new processor. It actually feels like a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 when I'm playing games such as Genshin Impact and also Honkai Star Rail. So if you're looking for a performer smartphone at its price range, well, you might want to take a look at the POCO F5. So I guess that's it for our video for today. So if you like this video, don't forget to give us thumbs up, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and be sure to click that subscribe button along with that bell button to get notified of our latest videos here in my YouTube channel. So once again, I'm Jam of JamOnline.ph. Thank you for watching and see you guys again in my next video.